Buonasera Emma.
Buonasera Fosca, come stai?
Bene. I'm so delighted to have you here as my guest. We are recording this podcast probably on one of the worst early spring, late winter evenings that we could, but hopefully the connection and the Wi-Fi, everything will be okay for the next half an hour or so while we record our chat. So first of all, I wanted to thank you again for being my guest, for coming on the podcast to talk about your new life in Italy, um, which is not that new because I realize now that it's almost been.
I actually just went back in our WhatsApp chat to see when I had first contacted you, which was
Yeah,
April of last year, and I moved here May of last year. So coming up on a year,
we're
which is
coming up on the year
it's been a
anniversary.
long year.
It has been a long year, and we're going to talk about all of the trials and tribulations because I've been following it very closely all along. And I think I want to start because, your story is so intriguing to me, right? Because
Yeah.
you're this, you're this young, brilliant engineer from the US, graduate of Northeastern University, and you come to Italy
Yeah.
when at a time when most young Italians, especially I would say engineers, are hightailing it out of the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my first question is why? Why?
Why? So I think for Americans, the answer, like you speak to Americans, oh, I'm moving to Italy. Oh, that's so amazing, right? I
Yeah.
get here, and it's one of the first questions that I get from everyone is like, why Italy? And I don't know if they realize how much Italy is loved from the outside.
I don't
Um,
think they do, Emma.
they
I don't
don't.
know how
They
good they
don't.
have it either.
But like the irony is that I get asked this question on top of a mountain in the Alps on a bluebird sunny day skiing. And they're like, why Italy? And I'm like, have you have you looked around? This place is absolutely insane. And there's the beauty. There's there's no doubt in that. But um like my desire and motivation to move here actually goes back quite a while, I would say. So as you said, I graduated from Northeastern University. Northeastern is well known for their co-op program, which means doing internships interspersed with studies. And instead of studying abroad, I did an internship. I did research in Switzerland. So this was my second to last year of school. I spent 6 months living in Switzerland and my first time living abroad. And I felt so immediately at home in Europe and
Hmm.
this part of Europe.
Yeah.
And ever since I left, I was crying on the flight home. And my motivation from that point when I returned was just like, I have to study, I have to finish school, I have to do all these things, but like my goal is to come back. My goal is to come back in however I can to Switzerland, this mountainous part of Europe. Um, and so I graduated school. I uh, changed courses a little bit and moved. I went actually to Vietnam and taught English there up until COVID.
I had
Um,
forgotten about that, Emma.
yeah,
You have wanderlust. I had
yes.
forgotten about the Vietnam chapter.
Yes, what definitely was one of if Italy, like I say, Italy was a long time coming because I lived in Switzerland maybe almost 7 years ago, and Vietnam was kind of this instantaneous, just like, oh, I don't really want to go work right now. I want to go see the world and I want to learn something new about myself and and see what's out there. And so that was definitely one of the more spontaneous life choices, I would say. But anyway, I moved to Vietnam. There was COVID. I came back to the US, got settled into work, and obviously everyone knows how the COVID years went.
Yeah.
Once life started to settle, I kind of started having this thought again of like this nagging of like, okay,
Mhm.
this was a goal of mine for a long time. The nature of my job in the US meant that I was actually traveling to Italy
So
several
what,
times.
I don't want to interrupt, but what were you doing at
Oh,
the time, Emma? I don't know if we talked
I
about this ever.
Yeah, I worked at Specialized, bike company. Uh, yes. So,
Okay. Now I remember.
one of the
Yeah.
big US bike brands. I was working out in Colorado at the time and doing product development,
Oh,
and just so happened that we worked a lot in Asia, but then we also had a manufacturer in Italy. So I found myself in Veneto 4 times a year. And so that nagging was there, and I had that kind of taste. Every time I'd go back, I would maybe spend a week or 2, and I just felt myself kinda slip back in and just I think those trips, honestly, maybe had it not been for those trips, I would have abandoned the whole idea of, you know, that it's great and all, but you're leaving family and friends, and I don't know if it's worth it. And every time I go back, it's just like my heart would just beat faster. And I just had this, I'd come home, I'd talk to my friends, I'd talk to my family, and I'd be like, I need to be there. That's where I need to be.
I love
Um,
that. I love that.
yeah. And it's just wild that I I it kind of, went in and out of focus and intensity in terms of my pursuit. But then it ended up being, uh, what was it now? 2 years. I left Specialized, and a big motivation for that was to try something different work wise. But another motivation was just like, I'm not going to live in Italy if I'm living here in Colorado. So,
Right.
I can just kind of cut ties with what I have here and put my focus there. Um, and so, sorry, it's kind of a long bit of a long drawn out story, but I again, Italy was not maybe always the focus, but it was okay. This part of Europe for sure. I
Okay.
did a 3 week kind of one of the first things I did was a bike trip with my dad in northern Italy. We spent 2.5 weeks together, and we were on our one of our last days. We had our flight out of Milano, and we were driving back along Lake Como. He said, let's stop for lunch. And we stopped for the lunch in this town of Lecco, and normal sized town, but just
Yeah.
you have the lake, you have these mountains that just jut right out from the lake, and it reminded me of some of my favorite places that I've seen in Canada and what have you. But I just like, again, that kind of flutter and like,
Right.
like I want to be here.
Uh-huh.
That came back when I was on that trip with my dad. Um, Fast forward a few months, I came back to Europe, and was doing volunteering through woofing. I don't know if you're familiar with.
I
Uh,
am. I
okay,
am. And I'm curious about your experience if you want to talk about it just a little bit. I remember
yeah,
that actually. I remember the woofing experience. That was
yeah,
yeah, that was I think when I first heard of you.
probably.
Probably.
Um, I was, yeah, and part of this kind of year that I took off from work, my background has nothing to do with agriculture and farming, but I've always loved food and cooking and learning more about where my food comes from. And so I decided I did about 6 weeks, I think, of woofing with a few different um, families in different parts of Italy. But that was an opportunity to just dive a little bit deeper, get more of a sense of the culture, a little bit more of a taste of the
Yeah.
language, and that just kind of and it all just kind of came together in terms of um, going off of kind of a gut feeling, and then just having these different experiences that affirmed that feeling.
Yeah.
So, woofing was for people who are so used to working like myself, working at a desk all day. God, it is one of the most just liberating and peaceful ways to work and spend your time just being outside all day with your hands in the dirt. And I think
I agree. I
if
agree
anyone
100%.
has,
Yeah.
it's truly one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had in travel, and could not recommend it more.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think you've said so many things that I'm curious about, but I think, speaking about that connection, it's really inspiring to hear you talk about your relationship with Italy and how, you there was always this pull, but
Mhm.
you kept sort of studying it. You kept sort of giving yourself these little tastes and, so and then, to take a deeper dive into the culture and I like the way that you approached it I think in a very mature way, considering how young you are now and how even, younger you were then. So what happens though? So how do you land this like, dream job on Lake Como basically? And which is just like for anyone who doesn't know it, it's probably one of the most beautiful places in the world. It's everyone wants to go there. It's on a lot of people's bucket list, a term that I hate, but like George Clooney lives there. It's a big deal.
Not anymore. I've
Oh, right,
heard.
right. He
I
had
don't
sold.
think
I'm
he lives
sorry.
there anymore. Yeah,
I think I remember, but like a lot of other people
George
do
is
apply.
gone. Yeah.
George is gone, but he lived there for a very long time, and even beyond that, it's just one of those places that is so much a part of our imaginary when it comes to Italy, when we think of the Dolce Vita and stuff. So how does
Mhm.
Emma, who is woofing and who is making her way in the world of engineering in the US, what happens? How do you land this job? I'm dying to know.
So I I kind of touched on this when I was motivated to leave my previous job. It was, I'd say, partially, wanting to move to another part of the world, and then another part was wanting to explore a world outside of the bike industry. And so I actually had had ideas of, okay, I want to save the planet, I want to save the world, and I want to maybe do something related to agriculture. That kind of ties into my exploration and woofing. And I was really open, I think, to whatever work opportunity came next. But I would say the priority in my time off was really just putting myself in the place that I wanted to be in the world. And with the freedom that comes from not working, you're just the best version of yourself. And I had energy, and I was open, and I was talking, always kind of putting my intentions out there and just
Yeah,
sharing that with anyone who wanted to listen.
absolutely, absolutely.
And I really wasn't looking for work at this time, but I was in Italy, and I was here to learn and enjoy myself. I In between two of my woofing stays, I made my way back to Lecco. A friend of my mom, Adamo, who was a connection through the consulate, lives here. So I knew that I had, seeing it with my dad was like, I this is maybe a place I could live. Let's go check it out. I connected with Adamo. I connected with some not former coworkers, but connections through Specialized, through bikes. And I I think I've traveled a lot by myself, and I'm not afraid to just randomly message people and say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm
Good for
here.
you.
I have a backpack. Like, I'd love to do something." And so I messaged these coworkers, and bikes are the best thing in the world, and it's such an easy way to connect with people when traveling. So I knew that these connections were here. I messaged them on Instagram, just like, "Hey, I'm traveling around, would love to go for a ride." And just like putting myself out there like that just set everything into motion. And I ended up getting connected with these group of guys here, got hosted, went on like a 20 guy bike trip to Finale Ligure and went mountain biking. And I think in order, when you're thinking about moving to a place, the people, it's the most important thing.
Absolutely, Emma.
You
Absolutely.
you get to see how they live. You get to see what it actually means to live there versus just staying on the surface. And so, this could have happened in another part of Italy, but I was drawn to as you said, the beauty of this place. And
Yeah.
then having this immediate kind of not community, but sense of what a community here is like
Mhm.
was just okay again, like another motivation to to put my efforts here. And so I come back from this bike trip, and another old coworker connection saw that I was in the area and said, hey, let's go for a ride. Okay. Twist my arm. And we go for this epic ride. We're above the lake. We go for an aperitivo after. And he knows that I've been looking for jobs for a while. And we're having an aperitivo, of course, Aperol Spritz. And he pulls out his phone and says, I don't know if you know, but Matt Helmets is hiring. Where we pull up their career page. And what do you know? They're looking for a product developer. And I'm reading through the job description, looking through the bullet points. Okay, I can do that. I've done that. Okay, this I could learn. Requirement of being able to speak English. And so I got connected to them just through email uh, from that. And went, I had lined up another woofing, went to Torino. Sorry, my computer is like making noises, but I went to Torino to do my last woofing. And then I'm emailing with the company and I'm like, I'm still in Italy. And they're like, can you come, this Friday or whatever? I said, I finished my woofing. Sure, I'll take a train and come right back. So I was already in the area. I went back. I went to the office and met them, interviewed. And then, however, I don't know, that was November. I think I got an offer in maybe March or February. So 4 months later, I got an offer. And so I, in a way, applied, but I put all of my eggs in that basket. I did not apply to any other job. I just, everything just kind of fell so beautifully into place. And I had such a strong sense that like, this was all meant to happen in this way. And I didn't let myself believe that it wasn't going to happen. I just said, I don't know when. It may be 10 years because nothing in Italy moves quickly, but it will happen. I just had this sense, and what do you know? Here I am.
It's such a great story. It's and you've painted, and I wasn't thinking about it when, before we recorded the podcast, even though I
Yeah.
know the important role, the fundamental role that cycling plays in your life. But
Yes.
I don't know why, but I had never thought about it in such a serious way like that. So many of my clients, so many of my people I talk to say, God, it's so hard to find community here. It's so hard to really feel like you're a part of something. And I always say, oh, you really, it's if you get involved in something you love, blah, blah, blah. So for you, it was really organic. You already had professional
Absolutely.
relationships with these people. Your whole, I love what you said, that by doing that bike ride, right? That epic
Mhm.
bike, one of the epic bike rides, you realize that it wasn't maybe your community yet, but you saw that it could be and that it would be. Um,
Totally.
Anyone who doesn't know Italy that well, maybe doesn't know, but the Italians are obsessed with cycling. It's like such a huge deal here. And so much so that I'm sorry, but I complain about it because sometimes when I'm driving on those beautiful sunny days, it's just like hundreds of cyclists here in
Oh,
Tuscany.
we can be the worst.
I know, but it's okay. Now I'm used to it. I just slowed down. I'm just like la di da. And it actually, it's nice because it makes me slow down too. So I'm really glad you brought up this point because I think that it was that sort of notion that came about both because of the deeper dives that you did during your woofing. So, the way that you actively, and this is something like I'll talk about until I'm blue in the face, but like it's so fundamental to actively engage in a culture when you go to a new place. Um, if you can, obviously, and you could, and you made a conscious decision too. And so you sort of saw this like, okay, this is what my life could be like. And then all of a
Right.
sudden it is. So
Right.
I'm kind of, I want to know how you felt. Like, I mean, here's your dream coming true. You're working for this company, which I want to hear a little more about. And so how were you feeling at this point? Really, because it was really, I mean, I do believe that it was meant to be. I do believe you
Mhm.
felt those, that the, that fluttering feeling and the sense of like, when you're sitting down for the aperitivo after the epic bike ride, you're like, okay, everything's falling strangely into place. So
Yeah.
what was your reaction when you sort of landed?
When I moved here,
Yeah.
I my for the first because I arrived in May and I was exhausted. I think we've
We've
I
talked
would
about
just
that.
yeah,
We were in
which
touch.
is why we're recording this podcast.
Exactly.
When I have a home and I can sit on a couch, I'm not sitting on the floor anymore.
Yay.
But I I remember getting messages from friends and family, just kind of checking in, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I think my response to everyone was just, "I'm so exhausted all the time, but I feel like I'm finally where I'm meant to be."
I love that.
And and no, it was so true of just like there everything about moving to a new country is difficult and frustrating and tiring, but there was just this underlying sense of this is worth it and that I'm just so content to be here that I'm kind of okay to put up with the bullshit and whatever I need to be
Yeah.
here. And so I I still can't really believe of how everything happened and um just the little things that fell into place in order for the kind of the dominoes to fall in terms of one
Right.
connection leading to the next. And it was actually even like not going too much into the details, but when I was here with my dad, we had lunch, and after lunch he goes, I want to find a bike shop because like that's kind of what we do is like, oh, like, to experience another country, I want to see what their bike shop's like.
Absolutely.
And so we walk not that far and we see a specialized shop. And of course it's just like, okay, this is, I worked here and I've been to other specialized shops before and it's an immediate family, which is a really
Mhm.
cool, beautiful part of that brand, working for that brand. And we go into the shop, it's locked, we, like, ring the bell, no one comes. We walk away, and then we're like, "Oh, let's try again." And we go back, we ring the bell, and then this woman, Sylvia, comes up, and we chat with her, and anyway, kind of, that connection led to other connections, but she's, like, one of my closest friends now, and
No,
what's just
I
so
love
cool
that.
which is so cool of just that, you meet these people, and I think also in traveling a lot and going to hostels and and meeting so many people, when you leave, it's always tough and you say, I wanna come back, I wanna move here," and sometimes it's always a bit not shallow, but, like, it's hard to
You
follow up
never
on.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, sometimes you say it and you really just don't know. I mean, you
You
kind of
don't
maybe
know.
at the time you hope, but then things happen
Exactly.
and whatever. But when it does happen like that, it's just
Which
one
is
of the
so
coolest things.
Which is just so wild, like, right,
Yeah.
that I said, "Hey, I wanna move here. I'm
Hmm.
trying to move here," and then here I am, and I think I surprised the people here that they're like, "Oh, you she actually is back. Oh, you
Right.
live here
You did
now."
it. You actually
Yeah, you
came.
exactly, exactly.
So
So so I think it was just yeah, it was just I just didn't let myself feel like take no for an answer, and just put all my energy into making it happen, and it did.
And it did. And so I want to say something quickly and then I because we've been talking about all the great stuff and
Yeah.
we both know that
Well, it
there's
is all
also
Fosca, we're in Italy, everything's great. There
everything's great, but there is,
everything works, the train is always on time.
exactly, the
I
train
was
is
not 30
on time.
minutes late this morning.
Well, yeah, but actually the problem is that, today there's extreme weather. The problem is every other day. But, you know, you said a couple, obviously, you said a few things that I want to contextualize just a little because you do have Italian citizenship. And
Yes.
so before we talk
Yes.
about some of the obstacles, for a lot of people the fact that you could even apply for a job like this was already
Mhm.
sort of, a pretty big deal, because you do have Italian citizenship thanks to your heritage. Your last name is Boutcher, but your mom is an Italian American, so you got birthright citizenship through your grandparents. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
obviously, I want to say that
The key part.
it's
Yes.
a key part, and it made it easier, obviously, but that didn't mean that it was without some snafus. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about, I sort of I've been with you, I've been by your side, let's say,
Yeah.
during the whole process, which has been, which it's been wonderful for me to experience, moving to Italy through your eyes. I did it when I was about your age as well. And it was a very different world. It was a very different time. But I want to know sort of, obviously there have been all these glorious things, the community you found, the cycling, the wonderful job, where you are.
Yeah.
So what have been, I'm not going to use the singular, what have been some of the most challenging things for you? Can't all be blue skies and perfect bike
No.
rides and aperitivi.
No, unfortunately, it's not. I I would have to say the first thing that comes to mind is just navigating the Italian bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Um, and I I would say I'm in terms of kind of getting the major life things in place of documents and home and a car and all these things. Um, I feel like I'm nearing the end of it, but there is just this feeling of never ending bureaucracy and forms, and the hardest part of it all is that none of it is meant to be easy. There's no there's none of this process is optimized in any way naturally. And I remember I was thinking about it feels like forever ago that I got my residency, and I'm very happy now that actually these
Right.
bureaucratic things are not on my daily to-do list. But I remember just even the process of getting so having the citizenship absolutely makes so many
Yeah.
things easier, and I don't even wanna imagine the process without it. Um, but in terms of getting your residency, um, I needed a place to live, I needed a contract, and then once I had that, I probably went to the comune, I don't know, mul 3 or too
I
many
told you.
times,
I told you. I
too
remember
many times.
you gotta just go to the comune because you're gonna have to spend a lot of time there. At least you're in a small town, you know?
Yeah,
It's because
I think
I don't want to discourage you, Emma, but the bureaucracy never ends.
no, I know.
I'm sorry.
Um, I know, that's why okay, I need to when it's, like, raining outside on these days, I need to just remind myself, like, "Okay, at least I'm not spending an afternoon in the comune or something." So, it could be worse, but I I just made multiple trips back. I remember because, you need forms, then you need the landlord to sign the form, and so I remember there were times where I would go to the comune. Mind you, I also live I commute to work. I don't live close to my office, unfortunately, so I would need to leave work early to get back before they close
Right.
or make an appointment on a Saturday morning or what have you. And then I would go there ready to say, okay, today is the day. I check this off my list. No, today is the day they hand me the form that I then take home and sign and fill out and then bring back a week or two later. No, I could have you could have done it online. You could have, you know,
No, no, Emma. No,
you
you could
couldn't have.
not have.
You
No.
needed to come here. We needed to look you in the eye,
Right.
acknowledge each other, hand the piece of paper over physically, and then, see you in a few weeks.
Right.
Okay. So I think you're nodding your head through all of this. It's for people who live here for non-Italians, Italians, it is a massive headache. I will say that going through the process of getting citizenship, I always said kind of was preparing me for living in Italy. It said it's
Yeah.
kind of like they weed you out in that way. They're like, who has the determination to, to go to these appointments, to wait all this time, like, because it's not going to end once you have the
Oh.
passport. It's not smooth sailing. It's never
No,
going to
it's an
be smooth sailing.
initialization. It's like really, it's like an initiation. Excuse
It's
me.
an
It's an
initiation.
initiation, right? Because what happens is it's like, oh wait, you've got the wherewithal to, complete all the bureaucratic stuff. So actually you've earned your right to citizenship. And now welcome to a lifetime of
Yes.
bureaucracy, of really thick
It's like
bureaucracy.
Italian Survivor or something,
Yeah,
and
even in
only the
even in
fittest make it.
exactly, even in the light of technology. So, but I think about where you were a year ago, Emma, and like you should be
Mhm.
extremely proud of yourself.
Thank
Do you
you.
remember some of our conversations? I mean, you've done you've done it all. I mean, I know you're in the process of getting the driver's license, but remember those early days where you're like, oh my God, I have to find an apartment, and how does the healthcare system work, and the residency stuff. But so you did it, and I think I have to say that, reflecting upon it and sort of seeing myself in you, when it was like 30 years ago for me or whatever. And,
What age were you when you moved?
definitively, I was about 28. I mean, I was probably
Okay.
about 28 when I moved definitively, let's say. But I went through
Okay.
the bureaucratic stuff when I had moved here also sort of for a short time in like 95, 96, and then I moved back in 98, 99. So it was like in my 20s, like you.
Yeah.
And we
Okay.
didn't have any help back then. It was just like you needed to just figure it out. Like there were expats, but it was different. There was not this kind of communication. There was not networking. There was certainly, I mean, there was, but there weren't like Facebook groups and information out there and people who do this for a living like I do. And so I was just like, and so, but I have to say, like, it's still there, like something I was really surprised by. Like a very quick anecdote, but when my daughter started, I don't know if it was, I think it was when they have an app for schools, right? So you have this app, and I don't remember if it was I think it was already in elementary school. So there's an app where you see like all the grades and all the, attendance and blah, blah, blah. And to activate it, so this is an online app, okay? This is fundamental. I think she must have been her first year of elementary school. So the technology was there. It was like 2013, and I remember that I was like, oh, this is wonderful. There's this online app for everything. But you had to go in person, not even to the school, but it was like the Board of Education
Oh
to
no.
no, I swear, Emma, to get your credentials. No, in an
I believe it.
envelope, in a
I
paper
believe it.
envelope, printed out, with your credentials that you would then just go and put in it just boggles the mind, right? So even something that should be
Yes.
seamless was made.
No.
So I had to go, schlep all the way to the other side of town to go to the Board of Education to pick up an envelope with stuff that could have easily just been, sent to me via email. Anyway, so that just proves like it's just very thick, but you've finessed it, and I think you should be really proud of yourself. And you're in the process of getting your driver's license. Hardest thing I've ever done in my life. I always say it. It's going okay.
It's going okay. There is an app for that as well, and actually it works quite
I
well.
told you. I told
The
you the
app
app is
is
the key.
great.
Yeah.
The app is key. Yeah, it's going. I think, it's just you get certain questions wrong because you just don't understand the damn words. And then you look and then you translate it and you're like, "Ah, my teacher
So
thinks I'm an
hard.
idiot." This
No,
is like
it's
the
so
easiest this is the easiest question, and in Italian, it's the easiest question, but I just didn't understand that actually there was a word that negated the whole sentence, and
exactly. It's
actually, I do
hard.
believe you should wear a seatbelt, but
I know.
contrary to my
It's
response.
no, but it's hard because they do all these trick questions and you're doing it
Yeah.
in Italian, and they can ask you about like car parts and things. I mean, you're an engineer, you have an advantage. Like for me, I was petrified. I was like, they're going to ask me about car parts? Like everything's computerized now. Like that was another thing. Like, really? Like if my car breaks down today, it's all
Yeah,
computerized. Like, well,
yeah.
I can't do anything. It's not like the old
But
days.
is it all computerized?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, isn't it?
I know. No, I'm just making a joke that
Listen, I got
that
stopped.
it's not.
Listen, Em, I'm gonna say this right now. I'm not gonna say why I got stopped, but I got stopped by the Carabinieri about a month ago, and it was all computerized. Okay, I
Okay, okay.
guarantee the
Some things are
Carabinieri.
not still in paper form. Okay.
Exactly. So for those who don't know, the Carabinieri are the police. They're the military police, and they stopped me. I
Mhm.
didn't make any violations. It's a long story. We'll tell it another time off mic. But I just want you to know that at least the Carabinieri, everything is definitely up to date and
Is
computerized.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's just an FYI. So
Good.
so we've talked about sort of the difficulty of bureaucracy, but what I'm really curious about is, so what is the best thing about living here? I mean, what are you just like loving every day? Like every day you're like, yes, Emma, way to go.
I wouldn't say it's an everyday thing, but I think there is something about Italy that I think people sense when they travel here and is maybe what makes it such a gives it such this magnetic pull. But for me,
Yeah,
it's so much just been the people that I've met, the community that I've made, that has just easily been the best part for me. And
yeah.
I will say in the summer, I hit a point where, I mean, it's light until 10 o'clock. People are doing things all the time. And I think one of the hardest things that I had to learn early on was how to say no to Italians because they are such social creatures. They are so social. And I think I would say I'm definitely more of an extrovert than an introvert, but I really appreciate my alone time and my time to just process or like, I don't need to eat every meal with other people. And um just their constant desire to be in the presence of other people just makes you always feel so um never alone. And I think it's just one of the most beautiful parts about living here, without a doubt. And like I said, I think I kind of went to one end of the extreme this summer where I was freshly here and it was so important for me knowing that making this a new home for myself, it was so important that I felt like I had friends who almost, felt like family here. So I really was saying yes to everything. And then my body would just be like, no,
But
you need to.
yeah, recoup. I'm the same way, but you did the right thing because, it's something I tell people all the time. You can't, and whether that's if you travel even just for a short time or if you're, moving to a new place, you really need to just say yes. If you
Mhm.
want to have those experiences and really become a part of the culture, yeah, Italians are really, they're like very social animals and it can be exhausting, and
Yes.
like and I think it is the social structure, it's the family structure. Italians always hang out in like huge groups of friends and it's just like, and I think a lot of the socialization plays out in a public way, as well. So
Mhm.
at the piazza or at an aperitivo or cycling, things like that. Italians are also very athletic. They love the great outdoors. And so, everything you say makes perfect sense to me because there is something here that I think is, I mean, you can find it, of course, in everywhere in the world, but here it really is alive and well, especially I think in places like where you're living. So
Mhm.
we're sort of coming to the end, and I have two sort of burning questions for you as we come to
Sure.
a close. One is just because I'm intrigued by this, and you and I have talked about this as well, but just wonder what kind of differences you found in the work culture.
Mhm. The I think having worked with Italians in the past, having worked with a factory from afar, I definitely, had some ideas of how it would be. Also watching kind of going through the process of the citizenship, watching, or I guess speaking with my mom about her work with the consulate. I definitely already knew that, it maybe wasn't gonna be as insane as the US. And actually, I will say this is another key point of my motivation to move here was I I've I'm someone who enjoys working. I like working hard. I like feeling like I have a purpose and I'm working towards something with other people. But the US kind of burned me out, and I have so many passions outside of work. And so having, that time I spent in Switzerland, having just seeing the recalibration, just a better balance that I find is generally struck here. And of course, I live outside of Milano. I live in the north of Italy. So when you speak to people here, they say, we work so much. But their reference is the South.
Yeah.
And coming
Yeah.
from the US, my reference is
The
the
US.
US work
Yeah.
culture, which is when it comes to work hours, when it comes to lack of vacation time, having that as a perspective, I feel just so much more balanced here with work. And that has to be one of the best things is that, the weekend rolls around, or even just a night after work, and it's just my brain just switches, and I'm not taking stuff home with me. So um I would say, I'm trying to remember now what even the question was. Oh,
Sort of
what
the
is
difference in
working?
the work culture,
Yeah, I
and
think
yeah,
yeah,
go
go
on, go
ahead.
on. No, go on, go on, go on.
I know I would say, that would have to be just the work balance that I find easier to strike here, is so refreshing, and has made my life here so much more comfortable, and just, um, more aligned with how I
How you want
envision
to
my
live.
life
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
Um, I will say maybe one of the more surprising parts
Hmm.
has been in terms of the ways of communication and the differences in communication or lack thereof. I will say I'm also, an N of one. I work in a small family run company, so there are definitely some characteristics of my current work environment that are particular to also family run companies. So I can't speak to working in Italy as a whole, but it is it is drastically different in terms of communication. I remember, I think it was maybe my first week after work, I think I had 10 emails in my inbox, which for an American, it's like I was used to getting
I
m
could get that in an hour
yeah, exactly.
at Stanford, not in one day. Italians, I mean, email,
No,
if you want to, you got to pick up the phone.
you have to,
You have
yeah.
to pick up the phone, and even, or, WhatsApp, whatever, but email is it's gotten better. It's definitely gotten better. But if I think back to even just like a few years ago when I was still working at Stanford, Italians never really liked email. I think they really prefer that you just pick up the phone and chat with them. They love texting.
Would you say that that has to do with just this email's it's more impersonal? They wanna see
Yeah.
you, they wanna talk to you, they
They
wanna
want to talk on the phone. And it's
yeah.
like, oh, I hate talking on the phone. And so for me, it's like, can't we just do this in an email? But Italians love that human interaction,
Yes.
and I found, I think in, so many years of working here, I've realized that you just need to, you just get it done so much quicker if you just pick up the phone. Italians
Mhm,
just love the personal connection.
mhm.
So, and I just want to also comment that, the small family firm is the backbone of, Italy's economy. And so your reality, of course, is different from a corporate reality or not for profit reality, but it really does represent, I think, a lot of people's realities in Italy. And definitely the communication thing is like that's across the board, like across the board. So one of I think my final question for you might be, I don't want to ask you like, do you think you'll be here forever? Because I don't want to ask questions
Just
like that.
ask it.
Okay,
No,
but
I'm
okay.
kidding.
No, I mean, I feel like it's not possible to plan that far in advance, but
Yeah.
I think the important thing is that if you look at yourself and where you are now and where you were a year ago, I think you're probably like, wow, like, because I think there were times where you really felt that it was just a lot to go through, but you had chosen it, and so you listened to your voice, and so I think that's something that should be applauded, and I know that I hope that you're applauding yourself. But I think the final question that I'd like to ask is really sort of what advice you would give to somebody your age, a young person who is
Mhm.
thinking about doing something like this, which is, quite radical, but also, I think kind of a dream for a lot of people. So, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to do something like what you did, whether it be the woofing or coming and finding a job or whatever?
Mhm. I think I think as it relates to Italy, one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give, and this is something I had to give myself many times, was just patience. And again, this is okay, an American who's living in Italy. We have this expectation of emails, even of how quickly you need to respond to an email. We just have this sense of there's just more of a sense of urgency, whether it's necessary or not.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think for me, it was just being patient and letting things take the time that they needed to unfold. Um, had I forced things, or had I, also just maybe had even just given up and said, this is taking too long, I can't wait anymore. And I do think it is also good preparation in preparing to live here as well. It's just you really do need to be patient, and I think um, I find that to be a very beautiful trait of a lot of most Italians is their, I think, lack of attachment to outcomes. I don't know if you have this, but they just seem so, I would say, uh, present in the moment, not
Sure.
worrying too much about the future, and just kind of knowing that things can change at any minute and anyway, and at any point,
Mhm.
and just not getting too worked up about things. And
Yeah.
so I think, for someone who's looking to move here, it's just like, yeah, if there's that call to move here and there's, that feeling, it's absolutely gonna be hard work. It is not an easy thing to move somewhere and really start from the beginning. I remember asking friends, how do you do this?" And their answer was like, "I don't know. My parents did it for me when I was born." Like,
Yeah,
it's,
yeah,
you're
exactly.
really there's a lot to pack into a year
Yeah.
of time you have to catch up. Um, but I think just, yeah, if it's a goal and a focus, it's just let it kinda happen the way it needs to happen, and the less you can force things, the better, and that doesn't mean that you sit on your ass and you don't do anything. You put energy in, but there's a fine balance, I think, between, you know, moving something along and then just letting time take its course. So, um, I don't know, but I'm glad I was patient. I'm glad that things just kinda happened the way they did,
Yeah.
because I really couldn't have imagined a better situation for myself.
I mean, you also worked really hard. I mean, I think we need to kind of like underscore that. I think that for me, what's come out the most in our conversation, and also just knowing you, is that you really did take this very, um, you wanted to do this and you did it, and you made it happen. You did it in an intelligent way, and a well thought out way. And but I also like what your comments just were on the whole experience, and the advice you would give to somebody who wants to do something similar. Italians, something I've always loved about Italians is that it's, Americans always play the game. Oh, what do you do? Where'd you go to school? Da 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 da. And Italians, yeah, they'll probably ask you what you do for a living, but they're really much more interested in who you are and what makes you happy and how you like to spend your time. And I think that Italians do have, and but they're not, I mean, they're really hard workers. It's a misconception that I hate about Italy. And, this idea that people are just sort of sitting around doing nothing all day. It's absolutely not true. It couldn't be further from the truth. But Italians don't define themselves by what they do. So I think
No.
that's what what people get a sense of. And also Italians have, this sort of sprezzatura, and this ability to just finesse situations. And so it'll all work out somehow. And that doesn't
Yes.
mean that there's a laissez-faire approach to work or that there's a sort of like a laziness. Not at all. It's a
Hmm.
much more philosophical approach to the fact that, only a certain of, only so much is within our control, and your life is very much worth living. And so I think that is very refreshing coming from an American corporate point of view where we really are just very much numbers and we're made to feel very replaceable. And I'm not saying that that's not the case here, but it kind of is. And then we could talk forever about how workers are protected and all sorts of fun stuff. But it's starting to pour again, and I've taken up
Oh,
enough of your time, but I just wanted to say that, I mean, you've been such an inspiration for me. You're young, you're full of energy. You've gone and really just like pursued your dream. And there's something I think so inspiring for so many people out there, but especially for young women. You're a young woman engineer and you left the United States to work in Italy. I mean,
mhm.
Emma, you're you're a real success story. I hope you recognize, that this is something you should be really, really proud of. And I can't wait to see all the great things you do.
Oh, thank you. It's, I was driving home today and, it's a commute, right? But I was just like, I'm driving on Lake Como. I forget that most days. I take the train on Lake Como to go to work, and then I ride my bike at lunch, and then, I have a beautiful pizza for €8 in the afternoon with friends, and, um, yeah, it's a beautiful, as your listeners know, it's a beautiful place, but, um, no, I thank you. I'm smiling just because it just has this feeling of, yeah, it just feels very right for where I am right now.
Well,
I
that's
will
what
say.
I wanted to say. Like for me, what comes through is that, this is just absolutely what you need to be doing at this point in your life. And no matter what, no matter where you end up, no matter if you stay or if you go, I feel like working or studying in Italy prepares you for a lot. So I already feel like now that you've done this, Emma, I really feel like you can do pretty much anything. So I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I loved it. And I want to wish you the best of luck. And I want to thank you for telling your great story. And I hope, when I picture you, I just picture you cycling, along
That's
Lake Como.
probably accurate.
It is pretty accurate. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking, yeah, it's high time for a visit. I haven't been,
Yeah,
I haven't been in a while. So we'll figure that out.
we
We'll
will
figure that out
coordinate.
soon.
Okay, and then I'll hear the carabinieri story.
Yeah, I'll tell you that off camera, off mic another time.
Please.
Grazie mille.
Grazie a te. Buona serata.
Grazie anche a te.
Ciao, ciao.